This is Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app. Now, live from the Matt Black Kia Studios.
Oh, what an attack! What a move!
Here's Josh Hennig.
Hump Day, Wednesday, Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. We had football last night. We had playoff baseball last night. I mean, what a wild night of sports. Of course, when you're watching the playoffs, all you can think of is, oh, now I know another reason why the Phillies didn't make the postseason this year. When you're watching the football, you're looking around thinking, like, what the heck is going on? I mean, the most 2020 thing happened last night in football. The Buffalo Bills looked like the team that was off for 17 days. Well, the Titans looked like the better, fresher, more focused team. It was absolutely incredible. I didn't expect that at all. I did not expect that game to go that way. But it did, and it was still a fun game. I know half the world is all sitting here like, hey, the stiff arm by Derrick Henry. You know what the play of the game was to me last night? The fact that Ryan Tannehill multiple times ran for first downs and also ran for a touchdown. That was just bonkers. We got a lot of football to get to this hour. Also catch a little baseball as well. Dave Weinberg joins us for a Weinberg Wednesday. It is each and every week here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Of course, Dave, extra point columns over at 97.3ESPN.com. We'll talk some Eagles with Dave. The Eagles injury report is up on the 97.3 ESPN.com website right now. Alshon Jeffery back at practice. But, and I say but, you know who was not at practice? 9 players. 9 players didn't practice today. 3 of them were for illness. Man, whatever this illness is, whether it's a stomach bug or a virus or something, man, it's really catching the locker room. Can I just say this real quick? And I don't mean this to be disrespectful. I mean this just kind of like being a little matter of fact and a little bit of an off the cuff person. The Eagles don't have any COVID tests. So the protocols are protecting them from COVID-19, but they've all gotten a stomach bug. What does that say about the world we live in, right? I mean, how crazy is that? So we'll get with that with Dave Weinberg. Also, huge boxing event this weekend. Lomancho versus Lopez was just phenomenal boxing matchup. And I'm not even a huge boxing guy as much as I'm a UFC guy. And I even know how huge this boxing event is. But there's still no boxing or MMA in Atlantic City. What gives? Well, Dave Weinberg will talk about that coming up, the Hall of Fame boxing writer at 6:15. PlaySugarHouse.com text board is open, 609-403-0973. Don't forget tonight, doubleheader baseball action on 97.3 ESPN. We have Braves versus Dodgers, followed by the Astros and, I'm drawing a blank, the Rays. You would think I would know by now who's playing because I've only heard Mike Gill and Hunter Brody saying about 2 million times about how much they love the Rays, but apparently it's still ghosted my mind there for about 5 seconds. But we will catch the Dodgers and Braves in progress at 7 p.m., and then we'll get you right to Astros and Rays tonight, doubleheader right here on 97.3 ESPN. So we got a lot going on, a lot to get to in just an hour. I mentioned the Eagles injury report. I don't want to let this slip. You can go check out the full list of the people. Like I said, 9 guys didn't practice, and 3 of them were all because of illness. 1 was for personal reasons. That was Fletcher Cox. So I'm not going to read too much into that. That's for sure. Somebody's got a personal thing going on. I'm not going to judge anybody for that. But the big news coming out of this was Alshon Jeffery back at practice again. And it looks like, at least hopefully, fingers crossed, that he's trending towards returning sooner than later. And I have to assume that he's going to return this Sunday. And the reason why I'm saying I'm making that assumption is because I keep going back to what Adam Kaplan said on Football at 4 with Mike Gill and Hunter Brody over a month ago. When the Eagles finalized their 53-man roster after training camp leading into week 1, they didn't put Alshon on the short-term IR. And Adam Kaplan, along with other Eagles reporters and NFL insiders, all had the same assumption. The assumption was, well, they're not putting Alshon on the short-term IR because they want him to be available to play soon. They believe that he could return to action soon. That was the belief. That was the theory. You put him on long-term IR, he's going to, miss potentially up to 8 weeks. You put him on the short-term IR, that's 3 weeks. But the Eagles left him on the active roster because they believed that he'd be back sooner than later. Well, we're entering week 6 right now. And hindsight being 2020, one could rationalize that maybe they should have put him on the short-term IR with the designation to return after 3 weeks and then let him practice for the 21 days like Will Parks is doing right now. But you know what? You had him active for a reason. He's got to get back on the field. And he was limited at practice today. Made some nice catches. Looks like he's running pretty well. Deshaun Jackson also back at practice. Looks like he's running pretty well. And I thought what Doug Peterson said was very interesting. Because they asked him about Alshon and Deshaun today at the media. And he says, this is what Doug said. He says, that's why we practice during the week. We let them practice today. We see how they feel tomorrow on Thursday. We see how they feel on Friday. Then we make a decision for game day. I'm going to make the assumption that Alshon's going to be back. You don't keep practicing him. You don't keep having these opportunities to get him out there. And all of a sudden he can't be out there. I just don't think that you're going to take that risk. Just how I look at it. Alshon being out there is not just for the heck of it. He's out there because they are hoping to get him back on the playing field to play. And I think he's made it this far that he's going to get that chance to play. And the Eagles desperately need more weapons on the field, more reliable weapons for Carson Wentz because he's throwing the John Hightower and he's not able to catch the ball. Obviously, his timing with Miles Sanders and Zack Ertz is off. And the more weapons you have on the field, the better chance you have of winning football games. And I'm not going to say that Alshon's going to make a difference for them to win the Ravens game. But what I am going to say is that he does make a difference in the grand scheme of the season because you need him on the field if you want to have a chance to win this division. And you definitely have a chance to win the division because a guy named Andy Dalton is playing quarterback for the Cowboys. And I want to hear from you people, to say it nicely, they want to tell me that Andy Dalton got to the playoffs 5 straight years with the Bengals. First of all, you only know that stat because they said it on television about 200 times when he came in on that Cowboys-Giants game on Sunday. And number 2, go back and check out that Bengals team. Number 1, that Bengals team was stacked on offense and defense. And number 2, if you also could remember, Andy Dalton's 0-4 in the postseason. So he got them to the postseason all those times, but he never won a playoff game. We live in a world where TJ Yates has more playoff wins than Andy Dalton. So, yeah, I'm pointing at Andy Dalton and saying that guy is a reason, along with the horrible Cowboys defense, why the Eagles have a chance to win the division. And Alshon Jeffery can be a key part of winning that division. I just hope we do see him sooner than later on the field because, let's be realistic, watching the Eagles offense sometimes, even though they got a little better last 2 weeks, 25 and 29 points, definitely trending in the right direction. Teams are going to start defending Travis Fulgham more and more intently. You got to have more weapons on the field. And as Mike Gill mentioned earlier in the Sports Bash, later this year, there's a point where you're going to have Jeffrey, Deshaun Jackson, Travis Fulgham, Dallas Goedert, and Zack Ertz, and Miles Sanders all available. And if you have all those guys available, you definitely have a chance to make a run at winning the division. And as Dominic Toretto said in Fast and the Furious, it doesn't matter if you win by an inch or a mile, winning's winning. Nobody cares how you got to the postseason. It matters if you get there. The Seahawks dynasty, quote unquote, started with beast mode, running all over the Saints in a playoff series, and they were 7-9. You can make a little bit of noise in the postseason. Even if you do have a losing record, you just got to get in to make that noise. And Alshon Jeffery can be a huge part of getting them there, but we got to get them on the field on Sunday. That's the next step. 609-403-0973, the PlaySugarHouse.com text board to get on the conversation. 609-403-0973. Don't forget, tonight on 97.3 ESPN, Dodgers versus Braves in progress at 7 p.m. Dodgers currently lead 1-0 over the Braves. Top of the first, very early in that game. We'll get you right to it at 7 p.m. here on 97.3 ESPN, followed by Game 4 of the Astros and the Rays tonight on 97.3 ESPN. Game night being brought to you by Rocket Mortgage. Need to know what it takes for a home loan to fit your budget and your family? Well, Rocket can do that for you. 609-403-0973, the PlaySugarHouse.com text board. It's a Weinberg Wednesday. We'll get more into the Eagles next with Dave Weinberg here on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City.
You're listening to Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Of course, the Weinberg Wednesday, every Wednesday. Dave Weinberg, veteran Eagles writer, also Hall of Fame boxing writer, joins us each and every Wednesday to talk sports. Of course, we'll get on the Eagles. Also, talk a little boxing with him, a huge boxing match. Lomancho versus Lopez this Saturday night. Dave wrote an excellent column over Extra Points. He writes over at 97.3 ESPN.com talking about the situation with boxing and MMA, the latest with Atlantic City. So we got a lot to get to in a short amount of time with Dave Weinberg on the Boardwalk kind of hotline here on 97.3 ESPN. Dave, how's your Wednesday treating you?
Oh, awesome. Golf and beach. Can't beat it.
And you get the baseball on TV now, so it's trifecta.
There you go. Yep.
So, David, I got to start with the Eagles because, you know, obviously after the loss on Sunday, a lot of people have a lot of things, you know, rattling around in their heads. And there's a lot of, you know, we all know, you know, the fan base always reacts to something. And I want to start with your perspective on Jim Schwartz because I feel like while the guy does deserve criticism at times, like anybody does, I feel like there's this, like, reaction to him, and it's like he was never the guy that the fans liked or wanted, so they're always holding it against him, even though overall we know what we're getting from him. We know that he's a guy that when the front four doesn't get that pressure, they always seem to give up plays on the back end, whether there were injuries or not. So I feel like some of the criticism of him from a chunk of the fan base is a little bit excessive.
A little bit. I just think the fact that mistake that they made on Sunday with Nate Gary on Claypool was just so glaring, so blatant that I think that people just it was kind of like the boiling point, breaking point. I'm sorry for fans. They just like you mentioned, they're not the biggest fans of Jim Schwartz. I don't know whether it's because he wasn't really Doug's choice. It was kind of like forced on Doug. It's the two guys were hired simultaneously, so it wasn't like, you know, Doug handpicked them. Plus, he's not Jim Johnson, who was a legend and, you know, had endeared himself to the fan base. Everybody loved him. So whoever was going to take over eventually wasn't going to get the same kind of love and respect. And yeah, but you're right. It is a little bit. It's a little bit uncalled for. You know, they dealt with so many injuries, and like you said, the front four, everything is predicated on them getting pressure. When they do, things go well. When they don't, then they struggle. So they don't really have a whole lot on the back end to make up for it.
Yeah, I don't think some people understand that, like, for the Eagles, they're top 10 in the NFL in sacks. They're top 10 in the NFL in quarterback hits. Top 10 in the NFL in quarterback hurries. But then also, they're bottom 5 of the NFL in yards after the catch. So it's obvious that, you know, the team, they can, if they don't get to the quarterback, they're giving up plays. And we saw that with a veteran quarterback at Ben Roethlisberger, who, like every other offensive coordinator before Ben got a hold of Nate Gary, basically looked at Nate Gary and said, hey, there's my lunch meal.
Yeah, you're right. And you can also add, they're not doing a very good job of taking the ball away either. They're probably ranked, you know, towards the bottom of the league in that category, I would think. You know, the turnovers that flip the field and give momentum to the offense just haven't been there, and I think that's kind of like that's been one of their sore spots so far. And the injuries have had a huge effect. Let's face it. I mean, the secondary's been decimated, and they just don't have the depth, I guess, to overcome it. And whether they want to admit it or not, I think the loss of Malcolm Jenkins was really big, just from a leadership standpoint. I know Rodney McLeod has kind of tried to fill that role, but he just doesn't seem to have the same impact on the locker room that Malcolm had.
Now, you mentioned the leadership. I know the Eagles try to talk about leadership a lot. Oh, we have Brandon Graham, we have Rodney McLeod, but there's something to be said for the fact that Nate Gary, when you go back and watch that film, Jalen Mills is trying to tell him, dude, you need to do something else, just not hearing him. I highly doubt he's not listening to Malcolm Jenkins, right? Like, there's something to be said for the fact that when Malcolm Jenkins spoke, people listened on that field, whereas maybe if it's somebody else, even if it is Jalen Mills, maybe Nate Gary or anybody else is just not paying attention at the same level.
Yeah, you're right there. I mean, though you would think that if someone that sees something that's going to happen and going to be wrong, you would listen to them no matter who it is. But yeah, you're right. Malcolm had he's not having the best year in New Orleans, ironically, but yeah, he had a profound impact on. Everybody respected him. Everybody admired him, and it's to not have him out there is a big vacuum. And also, I'd like to point out, I don't know. I think you have to put a little bit of this on Jim Schwartz. The fact that Sidney Jones and Rasul Douglas are playing pretty well in their new homes. So maybe it is a little bit on the coaching staff that they just don't. They just don't get the most out of what they have.
That's a very interesting point. Let's dig down a little bit deeper there. By the way, Weinberg Wednesday, Dave Weinberg, veteran Eagles writer, joining us here every Wednesday on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Make sure you're following him on Twitter at Dave Weinberg 19. You mentioned about not getting the best out of some of these guys. So to me, I ask, which side of the coin then is worse? Is it the coaches who are not able to get the best out of certain players? For example, you mentioned Sidney Jones, Rasul Douglas. Also, Nelson Aguilar is actually catching passes for the Raiders right now. Or is it also on the front office not being able to give the coaches the right players that the coaches can get the most out of?
I think it's on the coaches because, they gave them Sidney Jones and Rasul Douglas and Nelson Aguilar, and the front office gave them those guys. Evidently, they have some talent, but the coaches just weren't able to get the most out of it. Coaching in the NFL is a really tough job. I mean, you're dealing with so many different personalities, so many different talent levels, schemes. It's really tough to get an entire unit to work in sync. You're always going to have mistakes. You're always going to have breakdowns, it seems like. But the good coaches are able to look past all the faults. And to Jim Schwartz's defense and Doug also, to their credit, they have been able to do that up till now. So I guess they deserve a little bit of a pass this year, considering all the craziness of the off season. They weren't able to be hands on with those guys. With their team during the off season, and I think that might have I know every team was in the same situation, but I think that they maybe hurt the Eagles a little bit more than maybe some other teams.
Now, the one guy they are getting something out of right now is Travis Fulgham, and Doug Peterson said today that even when Alshon and Deshaun Jackson come back, whenever that's going to be for those guys, that they're not going to just tell Travis, hey, thanks for the good time, not go to the bench, that they are planning on using him still in the offense. So that has to be encouraging, right? That Doug says, listen, we found something here. We're not just going to tell him to go sit on the bench when the veterans come back, that we're going to try to make this all work, because obviously there is a connection between Wentz and Fulgham.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, how could you possibly take him out of the offense the way he's been playing? Game-winning catch at San Francisco, 152 receiving yards last week at Pittsburgh. He definitely has deserved that, proven that he deserves a spot in this offense. Question is, whose spot does he take? I would, if I'm Doug, I'd say, Alshon, take your time coming back, because it doesn't seem like he was in the best graces anyway with the team, with the offense and stuff. So I think you ride Travis Fulgham for as long as possible. Incorporate Deshaun and Jalen Reagor when they come back into it, and go from there. Because there's no way that you can. And I'm glad that Doug said that, because there's just absolutely no. Fans would have been in an uproar if you're going to put Travis Fulgham on the bench.
I don't know if this is in the Eagles' plans or not specifically, but personally, what I would do, Dave, you tell me what you think of this is, when I watched Larry Fitzgerald out with the Cardinals the last few years, they've used him a lot in the slot and in the red zone as a weapon, and I think that maybe Alshon, that could be something they could use him for, as like a red zone weapon, maybe like a big slot receiver kind of guy, and then let the faster receivers use the outside of the sticks and then clear out the space over the middle of the field for a guy like Jeffery, who, let's be realistic, he's not winning a leg race with almost anybody at this point in his career.
No, and his strength has always been in the past anyway, was being his ability to win the 50-50 balls, to out-jump guys, out-muscle guys for the football. So yeah, you're right. I think that might be a good role for him. Now, whether he'll accept that role is another story. I would think that he'd be thankful just to be playing any role at this point. But yeah, that's a good idea. I would think that use him in the red zone. They definitely have to get Zach Ertz untracked or whatever. I don't know what it is that's wrong. I don't know if it's just a disconnect between Carson and him. Whether I don't think he's letting the contract get to him. But it's that's the thing that's probably the thing that's bothered them the most at this point, the ineffectiveness of Zach Ertz, who's been their most reliable receiver in the last 3, 4, 5 years.
Do you think Ertz is maybe closer to the end of his tenure with the Eagles than anything else at this point? It's been suggested by a lot of people that, maybe this is a sign that Ertz is closer to the end than really in his prime anymore, and you already have Dallas Goedert, and he can basically do what Zach Ertz does. So, how do you feel about Zach Ertz's status with the Eagles moving forward?
Well, it seems pretty clear that they didn't give him the contract extension, that they're kind of considering him on the way out. Although I would disagree. I don't think that he's past his prime, and I think he's way better than Dallas Goedert, just personally, as a route runner, as a pass catcher. As an offensive down the field guy, I don't know what the reason is though for his decline. Doug has tried to explain it away by saying, well, he's been double covered, but he's been double covered his whole career and still found a way to get open. There just doesn't seem to be that, like I just mentioned, there just doesn't seem to be that connection with Carson that he had in the past, and I don't know why that is. I don't know if Carson's putting too much pressure on himself or struggling to make bigger plays down the field without looking at Ertz. I don't know what it is, but I do think that Zack is going, when he goes, and he's probably going to go somewhere else, he's gonna flourish. I think, just like Nelson Aguilar, just like the other guys who left Everton.
Dave Weinberg joining us for a Weinberg Wednesday here on 97.3 ESPN. Make sure you check out his extra point columns on the Eagles and more at 97.3 ESPN. I'm going to use that more specifically, Dave, because you're also a Hall of Fame boxing writer. And before we get to what you wrote about Atlantic City, I got to get your perspective. Lomancho versus Lopez. Now, I'm not the boxing expert that you are, but in my eyes, my two eyes tell me that I think Lomancho is the best pound-for-pound boxer on the planet right now. And I think this fight between him and Lopez is just... It's a super fight. It's just a shame that for the regular casual person, they don't have the names Pacquiao and Mayweather next to their names instead of Lomancho and Lopez. Or I think this could be one of the fights of the decade.
Well, the decade just started, so maybe so. But yeah, that's going to be a terrific fight. I would strongly urge people who who are looking for something to do to check out this fight. And you're right, Lomanchenko is a special fighter. Lopez, I would expect to maybe be able to hang in there for the first half of the fight or so, but then Lomanchenko has this ability to just wear guys down, break their will, if you will, and then kind of impose himself on people. And he probably is the best guy in the sport right now. But regardless, Lopez is no pushover either. So I would expect a really, really good fight. I'm looking forward to it.
What do you think happens for the winner of this fight moving forward? Because I know boxing, between the pandemic and everything that's going on in the world, and all these crazy issues. We know the whole situation with Canelo and DAZN. What is next for these guys? Whoever wins this fight, in terms of what is next for them.
Honestly, Josh, I don't know. Like you said, the sport is it's kind of digging itself out of a hole that was caused by the pandemic. And credit to credit to Top Rank and PBC for being, some other guys, some other promoters for getting the sport back on track. But it's the sport is in such a state of uncertainty at the moment. I'm really not sure what is next. It seems like it's almost like a week by week thing with these guys that, you don't know who's going to test positive. You don't know if there's another guy that's going to be able to step in. And, I'm not really sure what's next, to be honest with you.
What is next for Atlantic City, though? I know that
that's a big
that's kind of where I wanted to go next, because I know that you understand the scene better than anybody else does. So, kind of give everybody an understanding of what is going on, because you explain in your article over at 973ESPN.com that Larry Hazard said, "Hey, listen, we have a plan in place, but from what I understand, they've basically just been waiting on other people."
They've had a plan in place, talking with Larry Hazard and Nick Lumbo, who pretty much oversees the MMA portion of it. They've had a plan in place since, I don't know, April, May. But Governor Murphy just kind of sat on his hands with it. I don't know. I guess obviously he had more pressing issues at the time. But in the meantime, all the big promoters found other spots to open up the sport again. Las Vegas, MGM Grand, the Microsoft Theater in LA, Mohegan Sun in Connecticut. They filled Top Rank and PBC filled all of their dates for the year with fights in these locations. And Atlantic City, they were approved for this plan for, I guess, a couple of weeks ago. But by then, there's nothing out there for them. I mean, the problem that they have is that the big promoters are already locked in for other places. The smaller promoters can't exist without TV if there's no fans there. Fans are how they make their money. And when there's no spectators allowed, then it makes zero sense for the hard-hitting promotions or Rising Star or, some of the other smaller outfits that have done great business in Atlantic City in the last couple of years. They can't do it now. It just doesn't make physical sense for them. So the only way they can do it, I guess, is to wait. They just have to hope that it's going to come to a point where spectators are going to be allowed, 25% or whatever, and then maybe then they'll be able to do some business. But as of right now, they're just in a holding pattern. The only possibility, as I mentioned in the story, is Cage Fury, which is based out of Vineland of Rob Haydack. He told me that he's willing to, he's hoping to get back into Hard Rock, but only if they have 25% capacity. He has to deal with a UFC Fight Pass, which helps him a little bit. But the MMA, even more than boxing, really, they depend on ticket sales more than anybody. And until they're cleared to be able to do that, the boxing and MMA is really going to struggle in Atlantic City. It's going to be non-existent, really.
You mentioned it's non-existent, and that's part of my concern, Dave. And that is, we're seeing that other businesses around the country are really having to make some tough decisions. For example, in our area, there are 2 local gyms that just pulled the plug permanently on their properties because the pandemic hit them way too hard. We know that nationally, the whole AMC movie chain just decided to pull the plug on their business until further notice because they don't know when they're going to be able to get every state on board with people going and attending movies. And the movie industry itself has turned around and said they're pushing all their release dates basically to December in 2021 because of everything. So, how much longer can Atlantic City wait until the sport literally just passes it by? I mean, it's seriously a concern because of the fact that we know what Atlantic City can do and how important, something like this is for the local economy.
Yeah, I mean, it is a big deal. I think Atlantic City will be able to survive as long as the casinos are in business, though, and other restaurants, that kind of stuff. They're going to be okay. I just feel bad for local fighters more than anybody. The Thomas Lamanas, the Juice Youngs, those guys really have nowhere to go now. I mean, Thomas wound up fighting in Mexico a couple of weeks ago, and he's going back again later this month. You're kind of at the mercy because some of these guys they're very good and they have a lot of potential, but they don't quite have the exposure and the publicity enough to sign with major promoters. So they're the guys who fight for the hard hittings and star promotions in New York and Lou DiBella and main events, undercards, and they don't have that avenue now to develop their brand to get noticed, and they're the ones who are really good. I'm curious to find out what's going to happen to those guys. Are they going to be able to continue their careers? Because some of those guys are in their upper 20s, pushing 30, and the window of opportunities are closing for those guys. So they really have to find either a promoter or a network or something that's able to give them a shot. Because as it stands now, they're not going to have any chances in Atlantic City, at least for the foreseeable future.
You mentioned him having to go to Mexico and people having to go to different places to fight. I know that this is something that's not specifically to the boxing game, but something in sports as a whole, and that is, there's conversations about, the competitive advantage of, for example, Florida struggled at Texas A&M last Saturday because they weren't expecting the fans to be that loud, right? We're seeing in other places, some places can have fans, some places can't have fans. So, what is the impact for boxing that if they are locked out of certain parts of not just the country, but the world right now because of this pandemic, what does that mean for the sport trying to, just stay on track moving forward?
Well, I think they'll be okay as far as the United States goes. I mean, like Las Vegas has pretty much opened their doors to fights. L.A., same thing. Like I mentioned, Mohegan Sun, Florida even. UFC has traveled all over the country pretty much. And I got to give boxing and MMA a lot of credit for developing so-called bubbles. And Atlantic City has it too. I mean, their protocols that they've established are beyond the minimum requirements. I mean, they're, fighters who arrive are pretty much quarantined in their rooms. Meals are delivered to them. They have to train in their rooms. I mean, they're not allowed out at all until say the day of the fight, really. And once you're in the ring or in the cage, you fight and you leave the property. You're not hanging around. It's testing out the wazoo. It's just they've taken every possible precaution, and I don't know why it took so long for the state to give them the permission. And it's really a shame that it happened because, like I said, Larry and the New Jersey Control Board had established these protocols in conjunction after talking to ringside physicians and other state commissions and the World Health Organization, that kind of stuff. And it's really a shame because they had the opportunity there, they were ready and they're willing and able to do it, and by the time it happened, it was too late. It's really a shame.
Dave Weinberg joins us every Wednesday for a Weinberg Wednesday. Follow him on Twitter for all your Eagles and also South Jersey sports news. Dave Weinberg, 19 extra point columns at 973ESPN.com. Check out his latest about the delays with the boxing, the MMA, and Atlantic City. A lot of great quotes and information in the piece, as all guests he joined us today on the Boardwalk kind of hotline. Dave, always appreciate the conversation and the information.
Oh, my pleasure, Josh. Anytime. Look forward to next week.
Again, Weinberg Wednesday, every Wednesday here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Josh Hennig here. Game Night being brought to you by GMS Law. Make the right call with 4 convenient locations to serve you. Visit them online at gmslaw.com. Of course, the Play Sugar House text board is open. PlaySugarHouse.com text board is 609-403-0973 to get on the conversation here on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City.
Now, more Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Josh Hennig here, Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Thanks again, Dave Weinberg, for joining us each and every Wednesday. Talk Eagles, a little boxing today as well. Game Night is being brought to you by Matt Black Kia. Matt Black Kia wants to get you approved today. That's Matt Black Kia on the Black Horse Pike in Egg Harbor Township. 609-403-0973 for the PlaySugarHouse.com text board. Still to come tonight at 7 p.m. We'll get you to Braves and Dodgers in progress. Braves and Dodgers in progress. The Los Angeles Dodgers have set a postseason record for most runs scored in an inning with 11. That's right. They lead 11-0 as they start the bottom of the first inning. They just went off on Kyle Wright. He had no chance on earth of getting out of that inning unscathed after a while. I mean, it just got worse and worse. They had to pull him. They had to bring in a guy from the bullpen. Didn't get much better. Let's get to that game. Coming up 12 minutes from now here on 97.3 ESPN. Talking with Dave about the Eagles. I wanted to ask you about the Jim Schwartz question because, the further we go along, the more it seems that people are just looking to find something wrong with Jim Schwartz. And they don't want to accept the injuries. They don't want to accept the fact that this team is going to the postseason 2 years in a row since winning the Super Bowl, despite all the injuries. When you look around the game of football, I understand that people get frustrated and they get angry and they're passionate. And I'm totally on board with that. I love the passion. But look around football at the organizations that go around just firing people and have all kinds of crazy turnover. Do you want to be the Houston Texans looking for their 4th GM in the last few years? No, of course you don't. But yet all I ever hear is people who hate Howie Roseman. All I ever heard for years is Joe Douglas this, Joe Douglas that. Well, Joe Douglas was the guy telling Howie, he was the one making the draft board. He was the one who was saying we should pick this guy or that guy. But nobody wants to blame Joe Douglas for any of these picks in the last few years that did or didn't work out. You look around the NFL, look at the teams that have worse defenses in the last few years than the Philadelphia Eagles. Teams like the Cardinals. I mean, their defense has been a dumpster fire. And it's going to get worse, by the way, this year, because it looks like Chandler Jones is going to miss the rest of the year. He's going to be getting surgery on his bicep that's going to end his season, it looks like. You look around the NFL, other franchises that have serious struggles in the last few years since their last playoff appearance or since winning a Super Bowl or whatever it may be. Drew Brees is obviously on the downside of his career. The Saints were lucky to win that game on Monday night. The Broncos just haven't been the same since they won the Super Bowl and Peyton Manning retired. The whole franchise just seems to be rudderless. They don't know what they're doing. It's a mess out there. Again, look around the NFL. It could be worse. The Browns The last time they were 4-1 to start a season, Bill Belichick was roaming the sidelines in the 1990s. That's how miserable and pathetic and horrible they've been for the last 20 plus years. But yet there is this irrational discontent with Schwartz and Peterson and Howie Roseman. Listen, I'm not saying you have to build them a statue. Frankly, I don't think there should be any statues of any athletes. That's a conversation we can have for another day. I'm just saying that when I tell you that the Eagles' defense over the last few years has been top 12 in numerous categories, year in and year out, who do we give credit for that? Does Jim Schwartz get any credit for that? Does Howie Roseman get any credit for that? Does Doug Peterson get any credit for that? If the team is making the postseason, that's a huge deal. Because even if you take this year, right? 7 teams make the postseason this year, 6 in the past. So 7 teams in each league make the postseason. So that's 14 altogether. So what you're telling me is under 44% of the teams in the league make the postseason. 50% make it in the NBA and the NHL. Less than 50% make it in the NFL. So you're trying to tell me that getting to the postseason isn't good enough. That's all I hear when I hear people complain about Schwartz at this point. If you want to criticize him for not adjusting, let's criticize him for not adjusting. If you want to criticize Doug for not being adaptive and using his personnel better, let's do that. If you want to complain and critique about the fact that these guys could have done a better job at getting the most out of Rasul Douglas and Sidney Jones and Nelson Aguilar and whoever else you want to throw a name in the bucket, fine. I'm for that. Let's do that. Let's have those criticisms. But what happens is that people take the criticism and take it to Jim Schwartz is the worst defensive coordinator in the league. That's ridiculous. Have you watched the Dallas Cowboys game? I mean, come on. Mike Nolan's way worse than Jim Schwartz is. People would turn around and say, Howie Roseman can't draft. But yet they conveniently forget that Howie Roseman also drafted Lane Johnson, Zack Ertz, Carson Wentz, Dallas Goedert. So, okay, he doesn't get every pick right. Who does? Belichick doesn't. In fact, if you go through the Patriots' list of draft picks each and every year, sometimes it's kind of embarrassing. But their philosophy is we are to take as many shots as possible at getting what we want. We're going to take as many shots at draft picks and hope that some of them land. Context is everything in life. Don't be so easily swayed just because something doesn't fit the what you prefer or like. Appreciate what you have. Because the moment it's gone and you have something that's worse, you're going to be crying about that too. I think too many times in life we don't appreciate what we have. I think some people in the Eagles fan base are too quick to forget that Doug Peterson, Jim Schwartz, and Howie Roseman were the pieces that got you that Eagles Super Bowl for the first time in franchise history.